What is climate change? Well, climate change is a shift in a part of the country's typical weather pattern that could indicate a shift in a typical annual rainfall for a location, alteration to a location's typical weather for a month or seasons, and another possibility. Well, the environment change are also referring to a shift in the planet environment. Well, this could be the deviations from the average temperature of Earth. Alteration to where rain and snow typically land on Earth could also be the cause in the matter of hours. The weather can shift and it changes in the climate that can take hundreds or even millions of years. While it is also one of the most pressing global concerns regarding environmental problem.
National policy in climate change was in 2010 saw the adoption of nation's national policy on climate change, which serves as a framework for the nation's numerous climate change-related initiatives. Also, as a part of the 10 Malaysia Plan 2011-2015, the government spent RM51 billion to improve the resilience against climate change. Malaysia has formed a national climate committee to create and carry out national climate change policies. The method created include law governing energy use, climate change education, food security, and efficient coastal and forest management to slow down sea level rise and deforestation. To handle the sectoral implication of climate change, specialized adaptation measures must be taken in addition to the national policies already in place. The national policy on climate change serves a framework for coordinating and guiding major players, including businesses, the community, government agencies, and other important stakeholders in addressing the issue of climate change in an all-inclusive.
The greenhouse effect is the primary cause of climate change. Certain gases in the Earth's atmosphere mimic the effect of greenhouse gas by trapping solar heat and preventing it from escaping back into space, which will otherwise contribute to global warming such as carbon dioxide. By 2020, its concentration in the atmosphere had risen to 48% above its pre-industrial level before 1750. This is the cause of the rise of temperature in Malaysia. The annual mean temperature across the majority of Southern Asia has been slowly increasing over the past 100 years, in contrast to the global mean temperature, which shows notable increases in the early and late 20th century. Malaysia has a tropical climate. Malaysia experiences tropical weather. The average yearly temperature in Malaysia is 25.4 degrees Celsius. The average monthly temperature varies just slightly from season to season, fluctuating by 1 degree Celsius between a minimum of 24.9 degrees Celsius in January and a maximum of 25.9 degrees Celsius in May.
So now we are going to talk about flood. So what is flood? Well, flood can be defined as any high water flows that dominates the natural or artificial banks in any part of a river system. When floods come, it has an horrible effect on people, as will disrupt their daily routine, and the effect can persist for weeks. No matter how hard the government or the community try to reduce or entirely eradicate flooding, it is a natural occurrence. While Muar River Basin has a long history of flooding, there have been numerous significant rainfall events that has caused flooding throughout the catchments of the Muar River Basin. The floods that have been observed are displayed from the period of December to February from 1926 until 1979, while there are 29 flood episodes between 1980 and 2010. Well, according to a research, damages to homes, businesses, and industry is one of the flooding's impact.
Next, I will talk about deforestation issue. In Malaysia, deforestation has been a persistent problem for years. According to the UNFCCC, the main reason for deforestation is for mining, clearing for oil palm plantations, and other forms of agriculture. Deforestation is a significant factor in both global warming and the climate emergency to be occurred. Based on the Global Forest Map surveys, Malaysia has lost 40.4% of the total forest cover from year 2000 to the present, which is that mean the larger than forest loss in the Denmark. Not only that, 50% of forest was expanded at the time for Malaysia's oil palm estates. According to the Global Forest Watch, the humidity forest was shrunk by 70% during this time. The shrunk of humidity forests have led to the increasing in concentration of carbon, which is CO2 emissions. According to IPCC, deforestation are the second largest contributor to the CO2 emissions.
now, I'll be talking about objective and strategy of this policy. There are three objectives of this policy. First, mainstreaming climate change through wise management of resources and enhance environmental conservation, resulting in strengthened economic competitiveness and improved quality of life. Second, integration of responses into national policies, plans, and programs to strengthen the resilience of development from rising and potential impacts of climate change. And the last one is strengthening of institutional and implementation capacity to better harness opportunity to reduce negative impacts of climate change. There are also three strategies of this policy. First, mainstreaming climate change. Second, integration of balanced adaptation and mitigation responses. And the last one, enhancement of institutional and implementation capacity through coherent coordination of policy responses. SCC 2030C is an initiative with the aim of accelerating the transformation of cities in Malaysia towards low-carbon cities. The initiative is made by the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Corporation, MGTC, under the Ministry of Environment of Water, CASA, to help shift our city towards a low-carbon future. The challenge main objective is to create low-carbon zones in Malaysia's state capitals and urban areas. To lessen its impact on climate change, the city monitors, controls, and reduces its carbon emissions.
Next, we're going to move to the second objective. Among the strategies and programs carried out by the government is the National Adaptation Plan (NAP). NAP provides a framework to identify and prioritize adaptation measures to deal with the effects of climate change. Governments can develop and implement NAP to ensure that climate change considerations are integrated into national development, planning, and budgeting processes. In addition, the government has implemented a climate information service. The government established a climate information service to provide reliable and timely climate data and information to decision makers, planners, and the public. Lastly, government implemented a climate change mitigation program to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and slow the rate of climate change. These programs can include policies and programs that promote renewable energy, energy efficiency, and low carbon transportation.
Objective. There are two strategies under the third objective. Firstly is green jobs program. The target to shift towards the green jobs initiative is consistent with Malaysia Vision 2020, a vision aimed in achieving a high income status by emphasizing inclusive and sustainable growth. The Ministry of Energy, Green Technology and Water, which GETA, the government agency that is tasked to carry such responsibility, consider green technology as product, equipment or system which minimize environmental degradation, have low or zero greenhouse gas emissions, are safe to use for all forms of life, minimize the use of energy and resources, and promote the use of renewable sources for energy. Secondly is through nationally determined contribution, which is NDC, in August stating its intention to unconditionally reduce economy-wide carbon intensity against gross domestic product, which is GDP, of 45% by 2030 compared to 2005 levels. This is the first modification made to its NDC, which were first submitted in 2015, and it represents a 10% increase in ambition.
Malaysia has submitted its Global Climate Change Action Plan to the UN for the COP21 Climate Change Conference in Paris. Malaysia stated that by 2030, it will cut the intensity of its greenhouse gas emissions by 45%. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the COP21 or Paris Climate Conference resulted in a new global climate agreement that is applicable to all nations that aim to maintain global temperature between 1.5 degrees Celsius and 2 degrees Celsius. From 1970 to 2013, temperatures increased from 0.14 to 0.25 to 5 degrees Celsius each decade. Depending on global emissions, they are predicted to rise by 0.8 degrees Celsius to 3.11 degrees Celsius by 2090. Both the frequency and severity of heat wave are predicted to rise. This will rise to 93% under high emission scenarios, reflecting the overall higher temperatures. This extreme heat will exacerbate already existing urban heat islands such as Kuala Lumpur, which can already experience temperatures that are 4 to 6 degrees Celsius greater than those in the surrounding areas. When the mean annual temperature rises and heat waves become more intense and frequent due to climate change, more individuals will be at risk of developing heat-related illnesses. Under a high emission scenario, mean annual temperature is projected to rise by about 4 degrees Celsius on average from 1990 to 2100. If emissions decrease rapidly, the temperature rise is limited to 1.1 degrees Celsius.
While Malaysia occasionally experiences flood and droughts that have been impacted particular regions of the nation, in comparison with drought, flood hazard are yearly occurrences that are concerning. Checking whether the National Adaptation Plan (NAP) has considered and is effectively implementing the management of flood and droughts is very essential. While the Government of Malaysia has given an importance to flood mitigation program in the annual budget, planning is essential for flood mitigation and plays on the interference between river drainage capacity, while 34 local scale flood hazard maps were created during the 10th Malaysian Plan to aid in the implementation of disaster preventing measure. 194 flood mitigation program was also executed during this time. The nation is nevertheless expectable to measure weather disaster despite all of this collective effort. Well, what happened? Well, 25 persons lost their life in this flood of 2014. 500,000 people were affected, and for almost 2.9 billion worth of public infrastructure was damaged. Malaysia currently lacks a formal legal framework to address climate change. And Climate Change Act, while it will be presented years later, stated the Minister of Energy, Science, Technology and Environment and Climate Change.
Next, I will explain about policy evaluation on deforestation. The climate change policy in Malaysia has been established with different strategic thrusts to confront the issue of climate change. In this policy, one of the highlighted keys is a key action number 4, strategic thrust number 2, which is identifying and recommending strategies for the forestry sector's transition to a low carbon economy. Malaysia has involved in a few agreements and protocols to help reducing the carbon emission due to the deforestation. A few of the agreements can be seen is Kyoto Protocol in 1997, Paris Agreement in 2015, and the Strategy for Carbon Neutral Malaysia by 2050 that has been signed on 2020. Based on the Climate Governance Malaysia, sourced from World Bank data, Malaysia's greenhouse gases 2030 can be lowered to the 45% from the absolute GHG emissions. And the decline in Malaysia forest carbon sinks between 2001 until 2010 is a proof that the agreement has helped a little bit in control the carbon emission due to the deforestation. According to the statistic MNRE, also shows that after 2009, Malaysia deforestation rate has been stabilized and the CO2 emission growth began to decline.
In 2020, 14 from 25 low carbon zones and 20 from 45 low carbon partners that anticipated this challenge were awarded diamond recognition. The amount of carbon dioxide reduction recorded is 148,570,000 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent. Among the companies that got diamond recognition were MSU and Gamuda Curve. MSU was awarded 3 diamonds for a reduction in energy consumption of 23.38% and 5 diamonds for the reduction in water usage of 26.51%, while Gamuda Curve reduced carbon dioxide up to 221 and 366,000 tons from the baseline set. This is the equivalent of a 45% total reduction. Therefore, Gamuda Curve has earned 5 diamonds from MGTC. This data shows that this LCC 2030C is helping and effective in reducing the impact on climate change by creating low-carbon cities in Malaysia's state and urban areas.
Next, let's look at the policies evaluation for the second objective. The first is the National Adaptation Plan (NAP). The Global Commission on Adaptation found that investment in climate adaptation measures has a high benefit-cost ratio, with some estimates suggesting that every dollar invested in climate adaptation could generate $4 in benefits. Additionally, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change (IPCC) has found that policies and programs that promote energy efficiency and renewable energy have been effective in reducing greenhouse gas emission. The second policy's evaluation is about the climate information services. According to the report by the World Meteorological Organization, as of 2020, only 45% of the world's countries have access to high-quality weather forecasting services and only 22% have access to flood warning services. Although climate information services have the potential to increase resilience, they reduce vulnerability to climate change. Many developing countries still face challenges in accessing and using such information. The last policy's evaluation for second objective is about climate change mitigation programs. According to the United Nations Environment Programme UNEP, Emissions Gap Report 2021, global greenhouse gas emissions have increased by 1.5% per year on average over the past decade, with emission in 2019 reaching a record high. The report warns that even if all current unconditional commitments under the Paris Agreement are met, global emissions will still be 60% higher in 2013 than needed to limit warming to 2 degrees Celsius, let alone 1.5 degrees Celsius. Overall, the effectiveness of the program depends on various factors such as the level of ambitions, the specific policies and measures adopted, and the extent of implementation.
Next, I will continue to the evaluation of strategy under third objective. Firstly is green jobs programs. The green technology contribution to the total economic output can account for as much as 1 until 2% of the total Malaysian economy, measured in GDP. As of 2010, the total jobs created by the Green Technology Initiative reached near 200,000 level, especially shown in the table that I mentioned here. There were several hopeful improvements made to green growth efforts in the 2014 budget presentation. The National Carbon Reporting Program, also known as My Carbon, the National Conservation Fund, the Investment Tax Allowance and Tax Exemption for Green Technology Products and Services, and the establishment of Malaysian Green Foundation are some of the initiatives that have been authorized. Regular energy audits of public buildings and the investigation of energy-saving measures like solar panel installation and LED light bulb replacement are few of the initiatives that will encourage investment in green growth and expand the pool of available green jobs. The second strategy is through a nationally determined contribution. Malaysia has over the years benefited from financial or capacity building support from the Global Environment Facility, Germany, the United Kingdom, and other parties in a number of different fields. The nation has also implemented a number of programs to lower gas, green greenhouse gas emissions. The NDC of Malaysia will be implemented between 2021 and 2030. A number of significant brand new national policies are also anticipated to be unveiled soon. One may look at Malaysia Biennial Update Reports (BOR) to the UNFCCC, which are necessary for signatories to the Paris Agreement, to discover what the government has been doing thus far with the NDC. The three primary areas of energy, trust, and forestry are where the emission avoidance document in Malaysia third BUR field in 2020, latest data from 2016.
Policy recommendation number 1 was to develop and adopt a new low and zero carbon fuels by complete the National Energy Policy (NEP) to ensure that decisions about energy policy are too rough, consistent, and take into account trade-offs for the benefit of the entire country. To determine the nation course of action, the NEP should compile all plans and strategies relating to energy production, distribution, and consumption. Lack of cohesion and clarity in low carbon technology, development and application priorities. It is the responsibility of the government to promote or finance basic research because the private sector frequently declines to invest in early stage discoveries due to their unknown commercial potential. Coordination between the public and commercial sectors is needed to align the priority areas for the implementation of technology, halting the advancement of technologies like biofuels.
The next recommendation is involve private sector participation in addressing the challenges of climate change and promoting green private sector development. Meaning to say, the private sector has an enormous role to play in this undertaking, the investment and technological innovation that will underpin low carbon growth, providing finance for mitigation and adaptation, adopting lower carbon production processes, and encouraging and facilitating more climate-conscious purchasing decisions by consumers. The next is the establishment of a clear policy framework will be important in creating an environment that is conducive to private sector engagement, particularly in the areas of energy sourcing and infrastructure development, will give business greater confidence to undertake the low carbon investment that are needed. Third recommendation is planning for future climate change scenarios and building dynamic response strategies, including adequate research and infrastructure development. Rate of climate change and its consequences still remains and has important implications for public policy. Various studies have shown that the optimal mitigation and adaptation efforts may be greater than it would be if the median projection of climate change were known with certainty to be correct. The possibility of catastrophic damage from climate change cannot be ignored. This is because this implies that the only sustainable policies and strategies are those that minimize the risk of catastrophic damage.
In conclusion, it is generally acknowledged that climate change is a worldwide problem that calls for teamwork at the local, state, federal levels. Many nations have created national climate change policies, which frequently call for steps to cut greenhouse gas emissions, boost the use of renewable energy sources, and encourage sustainable development. These policies aim to lessen the effect of climate change and make the transition to a low-carbon economy